Welcome to Keystone Cold Cases, a podcast that aims to reignite cold cases across Pennsylvania. We are here to bring attention to the stories that have faded into the background, honoring the victims and their families along the way. Each episode is a step closer to understanding the truth, because every case deserves more than just a passing glance, and every voice deserves to be heard.
Hey, it's Melissa, and tonight I am here with Chelsea and Shannon. Ladies, how are you? Happy Halloween!
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, guys. I'm just so excited. It's my favorite day of the year. Literally.
Yeah, Halloween is like the best holiday, and it definitely is the best decoration. Sorry, Christmas, you're out.
But I feel like they're always lacking in how much they sell of decorations for Halloween versus Christmas. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not fair.
Definitely.
Well, tonight I'm going to be sharing not only a Halloween murder, but also a spooky story from the same exact town. And I'm not going to go super deep into the spooky, but I thought it was really interesting and worth mentioning. But before I get into that, just the usual business, if you could rate, review, and subscribe, we would appreciate it greatly. Also, we do have a Patreon. For only $5 a month, you get extra content. I think we do 2 extra episodes a month. We also send out quarterly surprises, which are usually super fun and adorable, and I'm not just saying that because I put them together.
I will vouch, they are adorable.
Thank you.
And actually, if you're unsure or you kind of want to see like what type of thing you get, some of our Patreon members have posted them on our socials. So if you kind of want to see what the vibe is, go and look because it's there.
Yes. Well, before I get into it, real quick, I think we should shout out some of our Patreons. So thank you so much to Brooke A, Carrie O, Lauren K, and Heather R. You ladies are the best, and we appreciate and love you.
Hey!
All right, ladies, anything else for tonight?
No, I'm ready to get into this episode.
All right. Well, one quick trigger warning. This episode will talk about the rape and murder of a minor. I'm not going to go into detail, but I do think it's important to discuss what this monster did to fully understand how horrific he is. So if that's not something you want to hear, I feel you, and we will see you next week. But if you're hanging in there, on to our case. So it's Halloween night. It's Halloween night, October 31st, 1973, and we are in a city called Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, which is actually the largest city in Fond du Lac County. At the time of our case, the city boasted a population of about 35,000 people, so not quite a small town, but certainly not a bustling metropolis. And it is a little over 20 square miles in area, although 1% of that. Although 1 mile of that is a lake. In 1836, Fond du Lac was the proposed site for the state capital of Wisconsin. However, the motion failed and Madison was decided on as the state capital. And for geographical reference, Fond du Lac is located not far from Oshkosh, which is home to an incredibly famous air show and also the home of the children's brand Oshkosh B'gosh.
I literally always wondered where that name originated from because it's not something we hear around here. I thought it was just like goofy for little kids, so it's interesting to know that.
I know, isn't it? I thought that was really cool, so I had to throw it in there. I knew about the air show because my brother and grandparents used to go, so when I was looking up Oshkosh, that was like the first thing that popped up.
That's funny.
So on the map, Fond du Lac is kind of in between Milwaukee and Green Bay, which are 2 pretty well-known cities in Wisconsin. It's like a little over an hour south of Green Bay, Wisconsin, home of the Green Bay Packers, and I really don't care about football, but I do care about those super fun cheesehead hats. I think they are the best fan gear one can own.
Second only to the cheesesteak hats that we have here in Philadelphia. Yes.
Do we really have those?
Yes.
No.
They're not
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they're not as prevalent as the cheeseheads from Wisconsin, but I've seen them plenty at Phillies games. It's pretty funny.
Damn, Philly, get it together. All right, Wisconsin, I'm sorry. Those might be cooler. I don't know. I'll have to see. Well, maybe we'll do a vote. We'll do a vote on the Facebook group. And then Fond du Lac is about an hour north of Milwaukee, which I'm sure all true crime junkies are well aware. Milwaukee is where Jeffrey Dahmer committed his atrocious crimes back in the late 70s, 80s, and the early 90s. Probably not what they want to be known for, and I am only a little bit ashamed to admit that Jeffrey Dahmer is the only thing I know about Milwaukee. So I'm so sorry, Milwaukeeans. Air shows, cheese, and Jeffrey Dahmer. That is pretty much the extent of my Wisconsin knowledge. But do you guys remember that TGIF show, Step by Step? That took place in Wisconsin. Yeah.
You didn't even know that.
Yeah, I loved that show. Really, I just loved Patrick Duffy still.
So also did Laverne and Shirley and Happy Days.
Oh, you know what? I was thinking about Laverne and Shirley, and I forgot that was a spinoff of Happy Days. But as I'm reading this now, I'm like, wait, was Laverne and Shirley done there?
Shamil Shamazel.
Ugh, greatest show ever.
I am really showing my age right now.
I've seen it, though. It's so good.
Okay, good.
I used to want to put an M on my shirt, like Laverne had the big L. I just thought that was so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the town of Fond du Lac is located at the southern end of Lake Winnebago, which is the largest lake in Wisconsin. And FYI, Fond du Lac is French for bottom of the lake, which might not be super creative, but I appreciate that they just kind of tell it like it is. And there's a park on the lake of Fond du Lac conveniently named Lakeside Park. It actually sounds incredibly lovely. It has picnic areas, a carousel, baseball diamonds. Apparently there's train rides and even a petting zoo. It sounds wonderful. And actually, Fond du Lac in whole sounds like a pretty nice place to live. I think personally it would be way too cold for me in the winter, but otherwise it sounds really nice. And Fond du Lac is actually home to the world headquarters of Mercury Marines, which is a division of the Brunswick Corporation. And Mercury Marines is the largest employer in Fond du Lac, and they are the largest maker of outboard motors, which I didn't know what that meant, but it's a boat motor. And that company actually employs over 2,000 people in that town. So one more interesting thing in Fond du Lac, and this is the spooky part of my episode, there's a home there called the Witherell House, and it's actually known as the Fond du Lac Murder House. And it has nothing to do with the case I'm going to tell you about, but I thought it was fun, especially during spooky season. So according to the home's website, it says, quote, "The abandoned Witherell House in Fond du Lac has a sinister reputation as a place cursed with death, where a man murdered his wife and daughter and then hanged himself in the barn. And the current owners have maintained motion detectors and other security measures in order to keep whatever evil lurks inside from escaping," end quote. Which I think might just be good marketing, but what do I know? So apparently the house was built back in 1853 by a man named Elihu Phillips. He was a former sheriff of a county in New York. Also, I found two pronunciations for Elihu, so I'm going with the one I heard more often. I apologize if that's your name and I'm butchering it. So Elihu was born in New York on February 16th, 1800, and he was the seventh son born to his family. And it was believed that the seventh son had to have some sort of, quote, divine healing power, end quote. So apparently he would get sent around to breathe on other kids to keep them healthy or make them better, but that to me just sounds like he's spreading germs. I was really grossed out.
Was this the belief, the reason why diseases like tuberculosis and scarlet fever devastated towns because of these old wives' tales? Because that's horrifying.
Yeah, probably. No wonder everybody was dying left and right from the plague. They were all breathing on each other. Well, if this divine healing power was legit, it really did not work for Elihu's loved ones. Death seemed to follow him no matter how hard he tried to get away from it. In 1825, he was married to a woman named Harriet Tousley. Sadly, though, she died after only 6 months. So this man is a widower at the age of like 25, 26. He mourned. Eventually, he got back out there, and I'm assuming he used like the 1800s version of Tinder.
The only thing that I could think about is like him putting an article out there basically for like booty in the news. I remember there was this case of a woman, and she owned a farm, and she would put an article out saying she was looking for a man to marry and help, the farm. And these men who wanted the land didn't even care what she looked like. They just wanted the money that came with it, and they'd come out there, she'd kill them. She did it to like 4 people.
I know that case. I forget who it was, but yeah, she would put it in there. Wasn't it the Lonely Hearts murders?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's been a long time since I heard it, but when I saw you like mention that, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's the same time frame, and that's what people would do. They would kind of just put it in the papers because like the towns are a little bit smaller. So what are you to do?
No, it's true. And I mean, Elihu he's a class act, so he would have a nice ad. I can just tell. It wouldn't be like pervy. Well, in 1828, Elihu happily married his second wife, a woman named Eleanor Jones. And he was really hoping he had found his happily ever after. But much like a Final Destination movie, that was not to be. Eleanor gave birth to 3 children during their marriage, 2 sons, Charles and William, and a daughter named Ellen. Sadly, Charles and William both died during childhood. And then Ellen was described as a, quote, invalid. And I'm not exactly sure the extent of that. That was the only description given.
Whenever I personally hear that, it just makes me think of someone that was special needs that just couldn't fully function, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. In 1838, after 10 years of marriage, 3 children, 2 of whom had passed, Eleanor, Elihu's second wife, would also pass away.
This guy seems like the most unlucky guy, but I've heard similar stories around this time frame because it's due to good hygiene and decent hygiene. I just think it improved conditions ridiculously for these from cities to small towns, and just not having that yet, or having the knowledge of why all this was spreading. I just don't think it was his luck. Yeah.
No, it's true. Yeah. I also think it's wild how the first people who were like, "Hey, we should probably wash our hands before we do surgery," and everyone's like, "What? What are you talking about?" Like, I can't.
Well, it's always interesting because when you're starting something new in anything, you always have people questioning you and make you sound like you're the crazy one until it works. It's like,
true.
Seriously?
Yeah, right. You're right. For a guy who is supposed to have all this healing power, things are obviously not going well. He's a widower 2 times over, and he's lost 2 of his 3 children. And this is all before the age of 50. And just an FYI, while all this tragedy is going on, Elihu was actually pretty prominent in his New York town's politics.
Yes.
He was a member of the Whig Party. He was a member of the Whig Party, and he was elected to serve in the New York State Assembly in 1846. In 1852, Elihu decided to get out of New York so he and daughter Ellen just could have a fresh start. So the father and daughter team and Elihu's brother, they decided to move out to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, where they settled on a piece of large farmland. And this is where Elihu would build the now infamous Witherell House in 1853. So sadly, 2 years after arriving in Wisconsin, Ellen would pass away at the age of 22. So,
which is wild because usually people move out west to get that fresh air and stuff like that. So you'd think that she'd be a little bit more healthier there. I mean, obviously we don't know what's wrong, but
yeah, you would have thought it would have done well for her health.
Yeah.
Alejo would continue living on the property for another 13 years or so until he eventually moved closer to the Fond du Lac town center. Now, this is where things get confusing. So, according to local lore, a man, his wife, and their daughter moved into the home, and one night the man lost his mind and he murdered his wife and daughter, and then he hung himself in his barn. But I do want to note that that's what the Witherell website says, but there are no actually any official records that this ever happened. But I guess who knows?
Right.
The home stayed vacant for a while Archie Witherell and wife Adelaide purchased the home during the Great Depression. They would be the final tenants of the house, living there until their deaths in the mid-1980s. So then the house was purchased by a guy named Dr. Kenneth Stormo. So Dr. Stormo, he passed away in 2013, but he was a forensic pathologist and he was the assistant medical examiner for Milwaukee County. Oh, and he was a consultant on Jeffrey Dahmer's case. So you know this guy has seen some shit.
I just feel bad for anyone who had to work on that case in any part of it, just because the depravity was so unreal.
I hope everyone had access to therapy.
Yes.
Well, so Dr. Stormo did purchase the home, but it doesn't seem that he actually ever lived in it. And as I mentioned, once the Witherells died, no one ever physically lived in the home again. At least no one living lived in the home. So rumors began, and soon the home became known as the Fond du Lac murder house. And while Dr. Stormo, he did visit the home and he continued to upkeep, but trespassers who heard the rumors, they began trespassing and destroying the property while they're trying to investigate, I guess. At some point, the home became completely abandoned, and I just read the other day that actually it was torn down earlier this year, which I feel like is such a bummer.
I hate losing such wonderful history, but just the cost of repairs for dwellings that sit is so astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel they could do something similar to what Penhurst does, and there's another spooky we covered where they run tours as well. There's just such a market for spooky stuff, or even if the Historical Society locally would help and step in.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't do something like that. I know it was very, very damaged, so you're right. While the house was abandoned, there were several strange occurrences reported, and this is, just fueled the rumors even more. Passers-by would hear screams coming from the home, although it was well known to be vacant and later abandoned. Others claimed they saw things moving around in the windows, or even creepier, they claimed to have seen figures standing at the windows. So I was on a Facebook thread about this home, and someone commented about how they went there at night one time, and supposedly there were what looked like bloody handprints in a certain part of the home, but I don't know. I kind of feel like a prior trespasser had done that on purpose, to make it scary. But regardless, the home has been an important part of Fond du Lac local lore, and it's a fun, spooky thing that they like to talk about. So now on to part 2 of our case. This is sadly not local lore, although I'm sure it's become a cautionary tale warning the children of Fond du Lac that danger is literally everywhere. So it's Halloween night, 1973, and the streets are filled with giggling ghosts and goblins, happily trick-or-treating and probably already planning on which candy they were going to eat first that night. So 9-year-old Lisa Ann French was one of those kids who couldn't wait to get out there and get that candy. However, one big thing stood in her way, and that was the weather. Lisa was supposed to be wearing a butterfly costume, but the temperature was in the low 40s that crisp fall night, and Lisa's mom, Mary Ann, she thought it might be too chilly for the butterfly costume. And do you guys remember your mom making you wear a jacket over your costume? That was the worst. Disney princesses don't wear windbreakers, Linda. lucky though. Here in like southeastern Pennsylvania, we generally have a mild, kind of on the cooler side Halloween. But remember, we had snow on Halloween back in '93, and then again in 2011. So Lisa's mom was luckily prepared with a backup costume because, you know, moms always have a backup plan. So she helped little Lisa get ready. The backup costume was Lisa dressed as a little hobo, which I'm not technically sure is a PC term anymore, but that's what all the articles said, so that's what I'm going with. Lisa was wearing jeans that had been altered with tape to kind of make it look like the tape was fixing rips and tears. Then she wore a green parka and a big floppy black hat, and she had freckles like dotted across her face, probably with her mom's eyeliner. And just like thinking about getting ready for Halloween, I can only imagine the excitement she was feeling while Marianne drew on those little freckles. And Lisa's plan, she was going to meet with a friend, and then the girls were going to be allowed to trick or treat by themselves. They were 9 years old, and I honestly don't remember when I was allowed to trick or treat alone, but this is 1973, and things were wildly different than they are now. But we have a problem. Lisa had made plans to trick or treat with her friend Ann Parker, and some sources mention the girls were going to make their way to a community Halloween event for kids. It was called something like Pumpkin Palace. So they were going to like trick or treat on their way there. However, Anne had gotten in trouble, and her punishment was being grounded on Halloween night, which seems excessive to me. Like, I feel like you should let the kid go trick or treat and ground her the next weekend. But I also don't have kids, and I let my dogs get away with murder because they're adorable. So maybe don't take parenting advice from me.
Coming from a parent, it would take a whole lot for me to take an entire holiday, whether that's Halloween or anything else, from my kid, because that's like a one-time thing where there's endless amounts of weekends. But that's just me.
No, that's what I thought. I was like, she couldn't be grounded like the next night. Like, come on.
Parents back then didn't trifle. You were grounded. You were grounded. It was they did.
That's true. They were like, I don't care if it's your wedding day. You're grounded.
Yeah, F your feelings. You're grounded.
True. Good point. I forgot. It is 1973. Well, it's unclear whether Lisa or her mother knew that Anne wouldn't be allowed out that night. And by that, I mean, like, I'm not sure if Lisa and her mom were already aware that Lisa would be trick-or-treating alone. Because we don't know if Anne told Lisa. We don't know if Lisa just didn't tell her mom. We aren't sure. Sources only said that she went alone because Anne got in trouble. So we're going to revisit this a little bit later. From what I read, I don't feel like Lisa or her parents knew that Anne's punishment was that she couldn't go out that night.
Maybe it's because we are just so connected now. They weren't back then. But as a parent, if I knew my child was to meet another child, I would not leave it to my child to tell the other party. I would have personally reached out and talked to her parents. Again, I know it's a different era, but like, I don't know. I feel like putting that responsibility on your kid is just too much.
Mm-hmm. And we don't even know if Lisa knew. Like, she very well may have gone to like the corner, for an example, to meet with Anne, and then Anne just didn't show. So I have no idea. That was not in any of my sources. But either way, that fateful Halloween night, Lisa, the adorable little hobo with a huge smile on her face and excitement in her eyes, she kissed her mom and stepdad goodbye around 5:45 p.m., promising to be home by 7 p.m. But tragically, little Lisa would never come home. And her murder would go on to haunt Fond du Lac for decades. And even now, like 5 decades later, this is a well-known murder in the town. Like, everyone knows what happened. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the sweet little girl, Lisa Ann French. Lisa was born on June 2nd, 1964, to parents Alan French and Mary Ann Gehring. I'm not sure of their relationship status, but by 1973, which is when the story takes place, Lisa's mom was married to a man named Bruce DePaul. And I'm not sure if Lisa's biological father was in her life, though I do know he lived about an hour away from where Lisa was living with her mom and stepdad. And then Marianne and Bruce had recently had their first child together. So Lisa had a little brother named Michael, who she just adored. I think he was about 3 months old at this time. The family had moved to that home at 192 Emery Street just 10 months earlier in January 1973. It seems like the blended family was really happy, and Lisa was just this adorable and wide-eyed, precocious little girl. She was a 4th grader at Chegwin Elementary School, and she was a Girl Scout, which I read that she enjoyed very, very much. And in an article in People magazine, Lisa's mom talks about what a kind-hearted child she was. Like, apparently one day Lisa came home from school and she told her mom that there was a girl at school who didn't have clean clothes to wear. And she asked her mom if she could, like, go through her clothes and give some of them to this little girl. And of course, Marianne said yes, and she and Lisa Ann went through the closet to see what they could give to her schoolmate. And she ended up with this, like, huge bag of clothes that she was able to give this little girl. And I feel like that's not only so kind, but also so mature of Lisa to be that age and have, like, the idea to do that.
She sounds like such a little empath. It's just frustrating and brings up the saying, why do bad things happen to good people?
I know. And this murder is so senseless. They all are, but this is just why. Needless to say, Marianne and Bruce were incredibly proud of Lisa, and they had no idea what horror awaited her when they kissed her goodbye. When Lisa wasn't home by 7 p.m., Marianne quickly grew concerned. Lisa was a smart and responsible little girl. She knew she was supposed to be home by 7 p.m. So I'm sure Marianne and Bruce tried to, like, keep themselves busy as they waited for the sound of the front door to open and Lisa to come running in excitedly with a sack full of candy. But as the hours ticked by, the door never opened. By 10 p.m. that night, Marianne was just beside herself with worry, and she and Bruce had alerted the neighbors, and a small search party had actually formed, and searchers were already, like, combing the neighborhood. At some point, not long after 10 o'clock, the police were called, and the search continued throughout the night. The next morning, Thursday, November 1st, 1973, the entire town knew that Lisa Ann had gone missing, and thousands of Fond du Lac residents, like, jumped in to help search for Lisa. At one point, there were over 5,000 people searching for her. The National Guard was brought in. There were helicopters circling overhead. They were just trying to spot Lisa or see if they saw anything suspicious. And people in the town really showed up for this family. I was reading old newspaper reports, and basically anyone interviewed was like, I'm out here searching because I have a child who was also out trick-or-treating, and I can't imagine the situation this family is in. And I just love when the town rallies around a family who needs it. Like, it sucks that it takes a tragedy for that to happen, but it's still, nice to see. And not only were people searching, but they were taking time off work. Like, so they're already out there searching, but they're actually taking their PTO days or getting unpaid to go out and search for this little girl that they had never met, which is pretty awesome. Not that she's missing, but that they did that. And neighbors and town folk coordinated a meal train where someone would, like, make dinner and take it to the family every day. An early theory that perhaps Lisa had eaten candy that had been tampered with and had gotten sick and was unable to make it home. But they didn't believe, if that happened, they didn't believe she could have gotten far enough away that they wouldn't have found her by now. And Lisa's mom claimed that Lisa knew the town very well, and she would not have gone outside of, like, her little neighborhood area.
I swear that rumor was always swirled around when I was a kid, and even today I hear people worried about tampered candy. It is like an urban legend almost. I think there are very few substantiated cases of it actually happening. I mean, I feel like even teens or older kids can tell when candy has been tampered with. It's pretty obvious.
No, I agree. And like there is a specific instance of that happening, but the father did it to his own kid. It wasn't like a stranger gave the kid poison candy. And I love on the news where they're like, people may be putting marijuana gummies in your kids' candy. I'm not sharing my gummies with your kids. Like, that's ridiculous. No one's doing that.
Definitely not. But definitely when I was growing up, we were not allowed to touch the candy until we got home and it was checked by my parents. Now we're just like,
yeah, me too.
Now we're just like, eat it. Shut up, eat it.
Just shut up and eat it. You're fine.
Yep.
Well, the search lasted over the next few days, but on Saturday, November 3rd, 1973, the search came to a tragic end that has haunted the town for 50 plus years. So that morning, in a rural area in the town of Techita, which was just a few miles from Lisa's home, Gerald Braun was driving his tractor around his farm when he came upon two brown trash bags that were laying about 18 feet off of McCabe Road. And the trash bags were right inside of a barbed wire fence that I'm assuming was Gerald's property. And it should be noted that Gerald Braun had been in the same area the day prior, and he said the bags were definitely not there. So when he comes across the bags, he calls authorities immediately, and a county traffic officer named Robert Dahl responded to the call. And this poor guy had the horrific task of opening the two bags. And at 1:30 p.m. that afternoon, a county emergency government director named Robert L. Samuel confirmed that the body of 9-year-old Lisa Ann French had been found. It would later come out that Lisa's naked body was in one of the bags, and then there was clothing in the other. And I do want to note, reports just said clothing. So I'm not sure if it was just Lisa's clothing or also her killer's clothing, but I believe it was just her clothing. Regardless, the worst possible outcome had occurred, and now police had a murder on their hands, which was not a common occurrence in Fond du Lac, and still not a common occurrence. I think the entire town almost went into a sort of collective shock. Like, nobody understood how this could have happened in their safe little town. The Milwaukee Journal wrote an article about how they found Lisa Ann dead after days of searching, and they wrote, quote, "Many of the volunteers at the search headquarters broke into tears early Saturday afternoon after the body was found. Some of them had gone without sleep for 40 hours, end quote. Which, I've never searched for anyone, but I can imagine being one of those searchers, doing this for days, being tired, being exhausted, being stressed, and then to find out, not that it was all for nothing, but that the person didn't make it. I feel like I would cry. It would just be so many emotions at once and just so depressing.
So I'm going to say this, and I think we've brought it up before. We actually kind of did a case on it. There was a woman in town who was murdered, and for some reason I was just way too close to it than I had wanted to be, and it just pulled me in so many different directions. I was like, tried to make it there for her vigil that they had at her apartment, and there was like a ton of other things, and there were searches, and it was tiring and miserable. And I remember just being so down on myself when the news actually came out, and everyone knew it before it came out on the news, because literally you could see the helicopters. It happened right behind my grandmother's living situation that she's in right now. And I remember the first thing that I did afterwards to try to make myself feel better or try to just like correct a wrong was I started fostering cats with Act Philly. And I guess I thought that that was like my way to at least put some good in the world since something so bad had happened.
What a sad situation it is just all around.
Yeah.
Well, it was determined that Lisa had been sexually assaulted, and when that announcement was made, her cause of death had not been officially determined yet. However, The medical examiner had said their preliminary findings indicated that Lisa had perished due to asphyxiation by suffocation. And a pathologist would later come out and say that they believe Lisa died from shock, specifically circulatory shock, due to the sexual assault, which is somehow more upsetting and horrifying to me than some of like the most gory murders we have covered.
That's very upsetting. Yes, I agree.
I read that and I was like, I had to take a minute. I was like, holy shit. Like, when you think about what that means, oh my God, this poor little girl.
Oh my gosh.
So, most of the investigation thus far had been searching for Lisa, but now a missing persons case had become a homicide. So, investigators quickly got to work. They began canvassing the neighborhood. They were banging on doors like day and night, asking every resident what they knew or what they may have seen that Halloween night. So, through this neighborhood canvassing, they're able to retrace some of Lisa's steps that night. They are able to confirm she never made it to the Pumpkin Palace party, as no one there had seen her. Like, she definitely didn't get there. They find out her first stop was at a neighbor's home where one of her friends lived. And some sources, back to Anne for a second, some sources said that this is actually when she went to Anne's house, like, to get her, and this is when she found out that Anne wasn't allowed to go out. Which, if true, is kind of shitty that nobody could call Lisa's parents and tell her. But again, sources differ on if it was Anne's home or the home of another friend. After that, Lisa went to the home of a teacher, Karen Bachneck, excitedly saying "trick or treat" when the teacher came to the door. The teacher watched Lisa head off, and her next stop was to the home of a local young couple, 25-year-old Gerald Turner, his girlfriend Arlene Penn, and their infant daughter. And Lisa knew Gerald and Arlene pretty well. Prior to living on Armory Street, Lisa's family had rented half of the duplex, and Gerald had actually rented the other side of the duplex. And since he and Arlene had just had the baby, Lisa would go to their house to play with the little girl a lot. So she was very familiar with them. So police spoke with friends and family. They spoke with that teacher. And then they go and they chat with Gerald for a bit. And they ask to look around the home. And while they do, they collect some fibers from a bedspread. But otherwise, they really don't see anything that is all that suspicious. So they leave and continue canvassing. So Lisa's funeral was held at 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday, November 6th at the Emmanuel Trinity Lutheran Church. There were hundreds of mourners there, including at least 100 kids from her school. They had actually been dismissed early that day to attend the services. And Reverend Paul Poitier did the eulogy, during which he urged Lisa Ann's killer to confess, saying, quote, "It is your only hope, otherwise you will be tormented all the rest of your days," end quote. Which I'm kind of like, Reverend, you must not be familiar with sociopaths who don't feel guilt. But to be fair, we weren't super well versed on the mind of a murderer in 1973, so I guess we'll cut him some slack. He then told the mourners to shoulder some of the responsibility for Lisa's murder for, quote, "condoning a permissive society in which such a crime could occur," end quote. Which I think is a little unfair, especially knowing there are 100 elementary schoolers in attendance.
This preacher sounds similar to what is it? Is it the guy from Amityville Horror, that like real skinny, crazy one? It's just like, repent. Like that's the vibe I'm getting off of this right now, because let's remember the deceased, not blame the town. It's not the time or place. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. It's not the time or place. I was reading it and I was like, I feel like that's so inappropriate. Like, we're here for a reason.
Yeah.
So the Fond du Lac city manager, Myron Meaden, he made a statement towards Lisa's parents saying, quote, "We, the people of Fond du Lac, like you, are stunned and numb. We are here. The entire city spirit is here to share your sorrow," end quote. Following the church service, Lisa Ann French was laid to rest in the Estabrook Cemetery, and her headstone is inscribed with the quote, "And they could not answer for these things," end quote. Which at first I didn't really know what that meant, and then I thought about it, and it's incredibly haunting when you think about it. So by December 13th, so almost a month and a half after Lisa's murder, police admitted that they had a few suspects they were speaking with, and they had searched homes and collected evidence, but they really couldn't or wouldn't say anything more concrete. And a lot of people think they didn't have much at this point, but you know what? That was not for lack of trying. This is a case where I truly believe that they worked their asses off. Like, at one point, the police chief and a team of 10 officers were working the case full time. The sheriff and the undersheriff were also working this case full time. And they also had the DA and a special investigator from the DA's office on the case. And just a quick FYI, because Lisa's body was found like outside of the city limits, the case was being handled by both the sheriff and the police. And again, round of applause. From what I read, they worked really well together, and there was no ego bullshit that we seem to hear about all too often. So they were working as a team, and they were getting a lot of tips, and they were following up on all of them. And they were also collecting evidence, like the fibers I mentioned. They were collecting head hairs from people, body hairs. And they were ensuring that everything was sent to the state crime lab in Madison, where it was, quote, "systematically analyzed," end quote.
It's possible that they were so meticulous and collaborative because this is a child, and it was such a gruesome crime. Like, sometimes I definitely feel like there's ego there, but like, this is one of those cases that really grip a lot of heartstrings.
This is a case that I'm sure that they sadly remembered for the rest of their lives.
Probably.
I do feel like these investigators were really ahead of their time. Like, not only were they really careful and meticulous with potential evidence, but they were also reaching out to psychologists and psychiatrists to try and figure out what kind of person would have committed this crime. And remember, it's only 1973. The FBI Behavioral Science Unit, which is now known as, I think, the Behavioral Analysis Unit, that had only been established the year prior, like sometime in 1972. And the OG FBI badasses, Johnny Douglas and Robert Ressler, they had only joined the FBI in 1970. And I don't even know like how involved they were with the Behavioral Analysis Unit yet at the time of this investigation. So I think for those investigators to be contacting psychiatrists for help with this, I was so impressed. The city raised money for a reward fund for information leading to an arrest in Lisa's murder. And this reward fund eventually grew to $12,000, which I looked up the inflation, and in 2025 money, that's almost $70,000, which is a huge reward amount.
That town really did rally behind that family, and it's refreshing to see.
Agreed. They like took care of their own, which was just like you said, it's refreshing and it's like heartwarming to see. So investigators continue working on Lisa's case through the end of 73 into 1974. And this whole time, they remained incredibly tight-lipped about potential suspects and about what types of evidence they were collecting from people. Which, of course, then rumors flew in the town, and it got to the point where people were starting to believe that they were never going to get justice for Lisa. Finally, in August of 1974, investigators got a confession. Remember 25-year-old Gerald Turner, who was like Lisa's neighbor? It turns out that he had been a suspect pretty early on in the investigation, but police were unable to fully connect him to the murder. He did take a polygraph at one point, which came back inconclusive, and he declined when asked to take another one.
I think it's always important to note that polygraphs aren't always reliable, hence why they are not admissible in court.
I feel like a polygraph is the same as shaking a magic 8-ball. So yeah, I agree. They also collected body hair from him, they collected head hair, and those fibers from the bedspread. So while they collected that evidence early on, it took several months for the results to come back. And during that time, they brought Turner in for questioning several times. So when they got the results back, the hairs and the bedspread fibers were a match to the hair and fibers found on Lisa's body. When confronted with the evidence, Turner confessed to raping and murdering 9-year-old Lisa Ann French. And he would go on to tell police a horrific story. That Halloween night, when he opened the door and saw Lisa, he admitted to police that he was, quote, highly sexually motivated, end quote,
Gross.
by a 9-year-old. That's fucking foul. Like, they should have just executed him then and there. Like, oops, my gun went off, my bad, problem solved.
I just think it's disgusting, and it honestly goes to show you it's not the clothing, it's the man. This poor child was in a full covering hobo costume, and he was like, yep, that's it. And it's revolting. It's honestly revolting. And honestly, you know, you mentioned that he is married, they have a newborn. The mother is probably like bouncing back and being focused on the kid. There is no excuse. There would never be an excuse to do what he did.
He's disgusting.
Absolutely.
He went on to tell investigators that he and Lisa began talking about candy, and he was able to lure her inside his home at 152 Rose Avenue. And I have a map we'll put on our socials and on the website, so you can see where her house was and where his house was. Once she came inside, he shut the door behind her, he grabbed Lisa, and he took her to his bedroom, where he undressed this poor, frightened little girl and proceeded to sodomize her. Turner claims that when he was finished, he realized that Lisa wasn't breathing.
It's because he was so selfish to finish his own needs, he had zero regard to this poor child at all.
Exactly. He also claims that he tried to revive her, but then he heard his girlfriend Arlene and the baby come home.
I mean, what was his grand plan if she had lived? She
Right.
knew this family. She was a risk to talk. Was he just gonna let her go? Doubt it. He has a young family and he probably wouldn't risk it. So part of me calls fucking bullshit because he knowingly killed her. Guarantee it.
I think so too. Yeah, what were you gonna do had she lived? What was the end game here? So it turns out Arlene had not been at the house because she had taken the baby to that same community Halloween party that Lisa had been so excited for. On Thursday, August 9th, 1974, Gerald Turner was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and sexual perversion. He was arraigned that night and bond was sent to $100,000, which in 2025 money is $655,270. So this judge was not messing around. And Turner would go on to recant his confession, claiming that he only confessed because he was sick and tired of the police harassing him every day. Okay, bro.
So what do you think's going to happen after you confess? That they're going to stop harassing you? They're going to, harass you more. You're now going to jail. Everybody's going to know what you did. Probably get sodomized yourself. Like, really? Jackass.
Hopefully. Yeah, he's an
Jackass.
idiot. He's a disgusting idiot. And unfortunately, it gets worse. Okay. When police spoke to Turner's live-in girlfriend, Arlene, they found out more about his actions at Halloween night. At 7:45 p.m., Arlene and their daughter arrived home, and Turner had come out of the bedroom, and he was wearing a bathrobe, and he told Arlene he wasn't feeling well. Arlene never went to the bedroom or the bathroom, and the bathroom is where Turner had left Lisa's body. And over the next 45 minutes or so, Turner would make several trips back to the bedroom and to the bathroom. At about 8 p.m., Arlene decided to take the baby and go to her mother's house for the night. And supposedly Arlene did not know anything. Maybe it was normal for her to just randomly go out at 8 p.m. and visit her mom. But it does make me wonder if she thought something was maybe up and either Turner told her to leave, or she was like, I don't know what's going on, but I want no parts of it. And that is purely my brain speculating. There is nothing documented that I could find.
Well, now that you're talking about it, it sounds like, he says he's not feeling well. He's going back and forth to the bathroom, to the bedroom. Maybe she thought he was getting sick. They have a young child. Trust me, there is nothing you want more than a sick child, because if the child gets it, that mom's getting it. So that could also be a potential. But if that wasn't the case, if he didn't say something verbal, or, just, you can tell when your partner's acting strange or like something's up. But it makes me more feel like maybe she's like, I don't want the baby to get sick.
No, you're right. I didn't think about that, but you're absolutely right. Sadly, we don't know what happened next. We aren't sure when he bagged up Lisa's body or how long he had her body. Some sources say he put her body and clothing in the bags that night and dumped them, but remember that farmer who found everything, he said the bags had definitely not been there the day before. So Turner is still whining that he only confessed because the police were mean to him. Wah.
But the fibers in his hair matched. His confession was just an added bonus at that point.
Yeah, I feel like they didn't even need it. And I want to note that while Turner didn't have any charges against him at the time of Lisa's murder, it would come out later that he had been highly abusive to his ex-wife and many ex-girlfriends. And he had sexually assaulted a 15-year-old babysitter. I don't think the girl ever told anyone, so that's why there were no charges. But this guy is very clearly a sexually deviant monster. So finally, on February 4th, 1975, this flaming bag of feces was convicted. The convictions include charges of second-degree murder, enticing a child for immoral purposes, and acts of sexual perversion. He was then sentenced to 38 years and 6 months in prison, and the judge made it clear to the court that he believed Turner had absolutely no remorse for his actions. Sadly, our case does not end there. This shitbag was paroled in October of '92 after serving only 17 years because he received credit for good behavior, which still happens today, and it absolutely astounds me how the courts don't see that their quote-unquote good behavior is because there are no women or children to rape in prison. Like, of course he's demonstrated good behavior. There's nothing there that he wants.
Well, I hope for fuck's sake he had to be registered as a sex offender when he got out, and it lists what he did, so at least the public would be able to protect themselves.
I believe he did, but this was prior to Megan's Law starting, so who knows?
Yeah, I forgot.
Because that was, I think, 94 or 96.
Damn.
I know. Well, needless to say, people were pissed. And I read that civil suits were filed for letting him out of prison. Like, people were not happy. But, unfortunately, the shitbag got to be free until November of 1993. So 11 months until he was out for 11 months before he was sent back to prison. And the state claimed they miscalculated his release date. And this actually led to a new law being put into effect in Wisconsin. It was added to the sexual predator laws, Wisconsin Chapter 980. It's nicknamed Turner's Law, and it was ratified on May 26, 1994. And this law, quote, allows criminals who have been paroled or released from their prison sentences to be detained in mental institutions if they are deemed to have a substantial probability of committing another crime, end quote. Which I think is amazing, because just because you served your time does not mean you deserve to walk among people. So Lisa's family and the people of Wisconsin breathed a sigh of relief that Turner was back in prison. But because this inflamed hemorrhoid whined and cried and filed appeals, in 1998 he was released again and sent to a halfway house. This time they released him because he wasn't deemed a, quote, violent offender. Raping a child to the point of murder seems pretty violent to me. Shortly after his release, he was at this halfway house and he yelled at and threatened caseworkers with a knife. But did anything happen to him? No, because he's not violent, remember?
No.
But by 2003, he was back in
it.
prison for violating his parole and having child porn on his computer. And anyone who thinks that these monsters can be rehabilitated, you're an idiot. And if you genuinely feel that way, open your home to them and let us know how that works out. I saw someone online like trying to defend him, that he was rehabilitated. That's not possible. Yeah. He was sentenced to 15 years and back to prison this monster goes, wasting space and taxpayer money.
I'm surprised he never got the pedophile special.
Yeah, I say that later, guys. Where's the jail justice? What is prison justice? What is happening?
Exactly.
Well, he was supposed to be released in February 2018, which is appalling. Lisa's poor mother had to start a petition in order to get them to keep his stupid ass in jail. And of course, this petition, wow. Of course, this petition was basically signed by everyone that ever existed. But, like, the fact that she had to do that to fight to keep the man who raped and murdered her child in custody, because, like, you know, of course criminals should have rights. Sure. So because of Turner's Law, Wisconsin Chapter 980, after much back and forth, Turner was sent to a mental health facility that is specifically for sexual predators. And sadly, because the world sucks and the criminal justice system in our country is a joke, this asshole's custody is still debated every few years. Lisa's mother has said that the murder is still fresh 50 years later. In 2022, she said, quote, "I keep repeating this time after time. It still doesn't get easier because it's just like yesterday, because it gets brought up every year." End quote. She would later go on to say, quote, "There's still more hearings, and I don't know when it's going to end. It's gotta end so we know he's going to be put away for life." End quote. The most recent ruling was in July of 2025, so just a few months ago, when a judge ruled that Gerald Needledick Turner will remain in the mental health facility. I'm not sure when this will have to be reconsidered again. Apparently there's something in that Wisconsin Chapter 980 law that says the person can be deemed like never, ever, ever, ever allowed out. But for some reason that determination has yet to be made for Gerald, and I don't know why. As of this recording, Gerald is still in a mental health facility. He's about 77 years old, and hopefully he will die soon and the trash will take itself out. Lisa's mother is in her early 80s and still lives in Wisconsin. Lisa's murder prompted cities and towns in Wisconsin to institute laws regarding Halloween. They differ according to town and county, but in Fond du Lac, trick-or-treating only takes place on the Sunday before Halloween between the hours of 3:30 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. And Milwaukee only allows trick-or-treating on the Sunday before Halloween between the hours of 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. Those dates and hours have changed. I looked up Milwaukee Halloween schedule from 2024, and it's almost like each neighborhood has their own designated trick-or-treating time. Both Fond du Lac and Milwaukee now, they're both on the Saturday or Sunday, like prior to the holiday, and they're still in the afternoon or very early evening. Which, I feel like that freaking sucks. Like, this asshole literally ruined Halloween for an entire state. And Chelsea, like you said earlier, I just wish someone would kill him in prison, but he's still kicking. I don't know where that prison justice is.
And for a case being that prevalent in that area, you definitely think inmates know who he is, what he did.
Exactly. Well, that is the incredibly tragic Halloween murder of 9-year-old Lisa Ann French on October 31st, 1973, in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. A retired cold case detective I know, I spoke to him the other day, and he said something that I felt was incredibly powerful, especially with this case. And I know he was paraphrasing Hemingway, but he said that everyone has 2 death dates. The first is when you physically die, and the second is the last time that someone says their name. So, to sweet little Lisa Ann French, everybody needs to continue saying her name.